Hey everyone, and with the release of Shazam last week, I decided to give you my ranking of all 7 DCEU films from my least favorite to my favorite. Now for my thoughts on the DCEU as a whole, I never really disliked or hated the DCEU. I felt like their scripts for their weaker films were lacking, but recently I feel like they've been stepping up their game and making fun and entertaining movies. And I definitely think they took a step in the right direction. And I'm looking forward to seeing more from the DCEU in 2020 with Birds of Prey and Wonder Woman 1984. Now keep in mind for this ranking, this is all entirely my opinion. If there's a film I didn't like but you like, good for you, I respect your opinion. Or if there's a film I liked but you didn't like, that's also okay. I respect your opinion. This is all my opinion, and I also want to give updated thoughts on some films in the DCEU. Either some films in my original rating, my review, either gone up or gone down. And all that out of the way, let's begin. Starting off the list at number 7 is Suicide Squad. Oh, what a big disappointment. I remember seeing the trailer with Bohemian Rhapsody in it, and I was thinking, oh, this movie is going to be awesome. This looked like something fun and exciting for the DCEU. This could be the Guardians of the Galaxy for the DCEU. This could be awesome. This looks exciting. I couldn't wait to see this movie. This movie is going to be awesome, and it wasn't. Now, it's not without its positives, especially with the cast. I think both Will Smith and Margot Robbie are both awesome as both Deadshot and Harley Quinn, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn in the Birds of Prey movie coming out in 2020. Looking forward to seeing that. And there are still some good performances from Viola Davis as Amanda Waller, Jai Courtney even as Captain Boomerang, and I liked El Diablo. There were some good, fun, and entertaining characters as well as some interactions. But I thought this movie was a complete mess. This movie is terribly edited. It doesn't flow very well. It's very choppy. This is one of the most poorly edited films I've ever seen. The soundtrack for this movie being all over the place. They like played this popular song and they played this song, and does this song really fit the scene, and does this song really need to be there? And they even play Bohemian Rhapsody at the end of the movie for 5 seconds. Just why? And then this song is just, the soundtrack of this movie just felt all over the place. Definitely felt like someone added someone's collection of pop songs and rock music onto their playlist and put those songs in the movie. The soundtrack of this movie felt tacked on. The action is pretty forgettable along with some mediocre effects. The dialogue in this movie is terrible. I could just make fun of some dialogue in this movie just all day. I'm an idea. Now that's a killer app. So that's it. What, we some kind of Suicide Squad? I lost one family, I'm not gonna lose this one. You met these people for like one day and now you call them your family? What? Jared Leto's Joker, I admire that he's trying to do his own thing, but it just wasn't executed very well with his minimal screen time, and he didn't really have that much impact on the plot. You could pretty much cut him and not a lot would change. It was a pretty mediocre portrayal of the Joker, and was let down since I was so looking forward to seeing Jared Leto, an amazing actor as the Joker, but he was fine. And also the villain is just so goofy and terrible with her like arm movements and doing this. Just, I couldn't take her seriously as a threat. She was not a good villain at all. This is by far my least favorite film in the DCEU, and I gave this film 2 stars out of 5 in my review, and over time I bumped it down to 1.5 stars out of 5. It was a pretty disappointing movie. Easily my least favorite film in the DCEU. Should have been much better than it was. And the more I watch clips of this movie and the more I think about it, it just gets worse for me. Coming in at number 6 is surprisingly Justice League. Now I remember enjoying Justice League when I first saw it, but over time and months go on and the more I thought about it, yeah, I think it's a mediocre movie. And with its positives, the performances range from nah to decent. Decent being Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman, Jason Momoa as Aquaman, and Ezra Miller as The Flash. And there are some entertaining but forgettable action scenes. And there were a few funny scenes in this movie. In my opinion, the funniest scene was when Aquaman was holding the lasso of truth. I'll admit that scene was pretty funny. My biggest problem with Justice League was just how rushed it felt at its length. At 2 hours, trying to set up characters that we haven't seen before. They haven't got their solo movies yet, like The Flash, Aquaman, and Cyborg, and trying to develop them in just 2 hours. That was a big mistake, and I think this film needed a longer runtime to maybe develop these characters more so we could maybe care about them during the action and by the end of the movie. And I stand by that these characters should have gotten their solo movies before Justice League. There are some pretty bad effects in this movie that look like a video game, and there are some forgettable action scenes for me. I even have trouble remembering like one action scene in this movie that I enjoyed throughout. But most of all, a pretty bad villain, Steppenwolf. Just a complete bore of a villain. He's not menacing, not interesting. He's just some evil guy who just wants this thing to take over the world. He's just a completely boring villain. Overall, I don't think Justice League is a bad movie. I think it's a pretty mediocre movie, and I would bump down my grade in my original review to 2.5 stars out of 5. I think it's a pretty mediocre movie. I don't think it's that bad, but should have been much better than it was since it's the Justice League. Coming in at number 5 is Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. Now, I think this movie is a mixed bag. And with the positives, I think both Ben Affleck and Jeremy Irons are great in their roles. I don't think Ben Affleck is my favorite Batman, since Christian Bale is my favorite Batman personally, but I still thought Affleck did a very good job as Batman. He was easily the best part in the movie, and Jeremy Irons is great as Alfred too. And there was still some great action, whether the fight between Batman and Superman that we've been waiting for, although it was brief, I still enjoyed that fight. And also the scene where Batman is beating up those guys at the warehouse was awesome. And there were some great effects too. Well, minus Doomsday, who looked iffy, but there are still some good effects in this movie. However, this movie is a mess. My biggest problem with this movie is the story structure. There is just too much going on in this movie. It tries to be a Man of Steel sequel, a Batman solo movie, and also being a Batman vs. Superman movie, and trying to set up the Justice League in the most shoehorned way possible, and also introducing Wonder Woman, and this movie just has so much, and it should have been Batman and Superman. Would have enjoyed this movie as Batman and Superman with their ideologies and their back and forth. It would have been intriguing and very exciting, but there's just so much in this movie just going on. It's not really interesting or exciting. It's just meh. And Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor was fine, but very miscast as Lex Luthor. I admire that they were doing something different with Lex Luthor, but it was just poorly executed. And I really like Jesse Eisenberg as an actor, but it was poorly executed. And also the Martha scene in this movie. Now, I will admit, that doesn't sound like a bad idea, but how it was in the movie wasn't executed very well. Overall, Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice is a pretty mediocre superhero movie. I don't think it's as bad as everyone's saying it is. I just think it's a very messy movie, and I gave it 2.5 stars in my original review, and I still stand by that. And now we get into the good movies of the DCEU, and at number 4 is one of their most recent films, Aquaman. This movie is cheesy and goofy, but fun. I like Jason Momoa in Justice League, and it's just like, okay, he's a good Aquaman so far. Interested to see a solo movie, and now he's the perfect choice as Aquaman, and I can't imagine anyone else playing him. Jason Momoa is great as Aquaman. He is funny, energetic, and charismatic, and he looks like he's having so much fun in the role. I absolutely love him as this character. He is perfect as Aquaman, as well as the supporting cast, especially Amber Heard as Mera and Nicole Kidman as Queen Atlantis. Both are awesome. The visuals are terrific, especially the look of Atlantis, which is amazing. This movie should have gotten an Oscar nomination for Best Visual Effects. There's some awesome action scenes in this movie that were very well directed by James Wan, especially this Italy chase scene where Black Manta and his minions are chasing both Aquaman and Mera. That scene was awesome and very well directed. And James Wan has definitely embraced the cheesiness and goofiness of the character. It's pretty much don't care how cheesy it is, it just goes for it. And there is a scene of an octopus playing the drums. Enough said. And sometimes the dialogue can be very corny and cheesy, and especially with the acting from teenage Aquaman in one scene. It was so bad. So wait, you're telling me Atlantis executed my mom because of me? That acting was so bad. Yeah, and I still wish that Black Manta was the main villain, and I think King Orm is a decent villain, but not quite as awesome or as interesting as Black Manta, since Black Manta was set up so well at the beginning. But overall, despite its flaws, Aquaman is cheesy, goofy fun, and I had a ton of fun watching it. And in my original review, I gave it 3 stars out of 5. I bump it up to 3.5 stars out of 5. I can't wait for Aquaman 2. Both Jason Momoa returning as Aquaman and James Wan in the directing chair. I'm looking forward to Aquaman 2. Although I'm not sure about the Trenches spinoff, but I'm looking forward to Aquaman 2. At number 3, Man of Steel. I definitely think this is one of the better Superman movies. I would say up there with the original Superman film with Christopher Reeve. It's got good performances from the cast, and I thought Henry Cavill did a good job as Superman, although maybe not quite as good as Christopher Reeve, but I still thought he did a good job in the role. Michael Shannon is great as General Zod, one of my favorite DCEU villains, and I liked how they didn't make him just an evil guy who wanted to destroy the world because he's evil. He had a plan and you understood what he was trying to do. And there are some fantastic visuals in this movie, some of my favorite visual effects in the DCEU, along with some great action like the Smallwood fight scene or the climax at Metropolis. Very awesome action scenes in this movie, and an incredible musical score by Hans Zimmer that was absolutely amazing. One of my favorite superhero movie scores, very intense and emotional. I especially love the flight theme when Superman starts to fly. It gets me pumped up every time I hear it. And I also want to mention that this might be my favorite line from General Zod. I was bred to be a warrior, Cal. Trained my entire life to master my senses. Where did you train? On a farm? I don't know why, I just love that line so much, and just the way Zod said that line. However, with its flaws, some of the product placement in the Smallville fight was a bit distracting for me. U-Haul, 7-Eleven, a fight inside an IHOP, and Sears. Some of it was distracting. And also the moment where Superman defeated Zod, this could have been an emotional moment, but it just ended abruptly, and that to me felt anticlimactic. And while I didn't mind a non-linear way of retelling the Superman origin story, I will admit that there were a few places where I was like, does that flashback need to be there, and this and that, shouldn't you show this flashback at that point? Overall, I think Man of Steel is a good Superman movie and one of my favorite films in the DCEU. And now we're getting to the top 2, and at number 2 is Wonder Woman. Now I was worried when this movie was coming out, since it was coming out after Batman v Superman and Suicide Squad, so the DCEU was in a messy place, and this movie surprised me how good it was, and also being a great female-led superhero movie, which was awesome. But what makes this movie work is Gal Gadot. She is terrific as Wonder Woman, and I liked her scenes in Batman v Superman, but this proves she is the perfect choice as Wonder Woman, and I can't imagine anyone else playing the role besides her. She's strong, charismatic, and brave. She was the definition of a hero. And I also loved her chemistry with Chris Pine as Steve Trevor, who also gives a great performance. Some terrific action scenes in this movie, especially the No Man's Land sequence. That was just awesome. Just Wonder Woman stepping out, just the music gets me pumped. I love that scene. And Patty Jenkins not only directed the action very well, but I also like the World War I setting, used very well. However, I do have some issues, especially with the third act and the villains. The villains I thought were pretty hammy and over the top, and I couldn't really take them that seriously. And there are 3 villains, and I wasn't a fan of all 3 villains: Ares, Dr. Poison, and General Ludendorff. And also, I don't think the third act was quite as strong as the first 2 acts. And I definitely think some of the CGI effects in the climax got very overblown. Well, but it's not all bad, but spoilers for Wonder Woman if you have not seen this movie. But my favorite scene in the third act was Steve Trevor's death. I thought it was pretty emotional, and I thought Chris Pine's acting before he pulled the trigger when he was in the plane, I thought it was great acting, and I felt so sorry for Wonder Woman when she saw Steve Trevor die and just losing her friend. I felt sorry for her. Although I heard Chris Pine will be back as Steve Trevor in the sequel, I'm not sure about that, but we'll see. Overall, I think Wonder Woman is a great DCEU film, and easily the best female-led superhero movie. And with Gal Gadot back as Wonder Woman and Patty Jenkins back in the directing chair for Wonder Woman 1984 in 2020, I'm looking forward to seeing Wonder Woman 1984. And for a while, Wonder Woman was my favorite film in the DCEU, but recently, one film came out and took the #1 spot, and we'll get there right now. And now, my #1 favorite film in the DCEU, and after I saw it and been thinking about it a lot, it still is my #1 favorite film in the DCEU. But first, I need to say one word, and that is Shazam! Shazam is a ton of fun and my favorite film in the DCEU. Zachary Levi was pitch perfect casting as Shazam. Not only is he hilarious, charismatic, and energetic, he definitely nails a child in a grown man's body similar to Big and pulled it off very well. The acting from both the child actor who played Billy Batson and one of the kids from It as his foster brother both did a good job. And Mark Strong played a very good villain in the DCEU, my favorite DCEU villain. I liked how they set up his villain very well and gave him a good backstory and you understood what he was doing, and he's my favorite villain in DCEU, and Mark Strong did a good job as Dr. Sivana. This movie had surprisingly good heart and emotion. I cared about Billy Batson throughout this entire movie and was really invested in the foster family part of this movie, and I thought it had a lot of good heart to this movie. And this movie is hilarious, laughing so many times during this movie. Convenience store scene and one scene in the climax that was hilarious with Shazam and his foster friends and the staff that just, thinking about now, it still cracks me up. And also one moment in the climax between Shazam, Dr. Sivana, and They're Far Away. That had me dying. Overall, Shazam was a ton of fun in the DCEU. I can't wait to watch it again. I had a ton of fun with this movie. I can't wait to see more of Zachary Levi as Shazam in the future. And Shazam is my favorite film in the DCEU. And that's my ranking of the DCEU from my least favorite to my most favorite. And I would like to hear from you guys. What's your ranking of all 7 films in the DCEU? Let me know in the comments below. And also make sure to like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe if you're new here. It really means a lot. I'm Jack Benner, and look forward to another movie review.